Hello, welcome back to Monster Frequency. It's me, Ben, here. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Now, fans of technology and innovation, you're going to be quite excited about this episode. We've got a truly fantastic guest, Dr. Jonathan Sackier. Now, Jonathan serves as Chief Medical Counsel for Helios Medical Technologies, and he's helping bring a range of medical advances to market. He served as visiting professor of surgery at Oxford University, and trust me when I say that he's been involved with a range of really remarkable breakthroughs in medical technology over the years. Perhaps one of the most notable things that he did early on is he was involved with the world's first commercial surgical robot, ESOP, the automatic endoscopic system for optimal positioning. Now, don't worry if you have no idea what that means. Dr. Sackier is here with us. He's going to run through some of these absolutely fantastic breakthroughs that he's involved with. And a lot of these things really do sound like they're kind of straight out of a sci-fi film. So prepare yourself to hear some really fascinating developments in surgical science. He's also a pilot, because apparently that wasn't quite enough. So he's a pilot as well. And he's even going to use the acronym Star Wars in this little chat. Yeah, let's see how he accomplishes that, shall we? And now, because he's very clearly a man who very much enjoys innovation, I thought I'd start our chat just by asking him what drives him to be innovative. Let's hear what he had to say.
I'm just fascinated by the process of invention and innovation. So the development of something new and its deployment to improve outcomes for patients. And I like to say we're all going to be patients sooner or later. So having had the privilege of practicing medicine for many years and seeing, people who are dealing with acute or chronic illnesses, anything we can do to improve their outcomes, we should do. And I don't know if it's the way my mind works when it's been something I've developed, or it's just that I enjoy the company of smart and disruptive people who see the world through a different optic. So I think the one thing all the different inventions and innovations I've been involved with have in common is that they're disruptive. They think of, we've always done it this way, why don't we do it that way, kind of an approach.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I imagine you probably faced an awful lot of people just, thinking, oh no, that sounds too much like science fiction or something, especially with robotic surgery. I mean, I know obviously, it is used nowadays, but imagine when you kind of were first getting involved with this and kind of first pushing through those breakthroughs, people probably, I'm guessing you did experience a lot of people saying, what on earth is that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm probably going to paraphrase because I can't remember the exact quote, and I think it was Arthur C. Clarke, but if I'm wrong, my respects to who it was, but there's an expression that to the uninitiated, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yes.
And worlds of innovation or invention, if something is obvious, then it's probably too late for it to make any big splash. The initial robotic development, it's kind of a dopey story. I was giving a lecture at the American College of Surgeons many moons ago, and they had asked me to give a talk on a particular surgical procedure, and I said no because I'd given that talk so many times I was sick of the sound of my own voice. And they said, well, what would you like to talk about? And I thought, well, why don't I just wax lyrical, hopefully, about what the future could bring? And my final slide was a cartoon that was drawn by an old school friend of mine, a shout out to Robin Gott. And it showed a sort of caricature of me sitting in an armchair with a martini in my hand with like Nintendo controllers, and in a cutaway, another room, Robbie the robot was operating on something, and I made some glib, stupid comment about, robots operating on people, and I get a telephone call a few weeks later from a very, very brilliant scientist, Yulan Wang, who remains a close friend and collaborator, and he said something to the line of, I understand you're an expert on medical robotics. And I said, well, you're sorely mistaken, because I'm not an expert on anything. And by the way, what's medical robotics? He had developed a robot for use in what was called the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars, pointing laser beams at erstwhile Soviet missile silos so they could be blown up before they launched and start a nuclear war. That was the principle. And basically the program had been cancelled, and Ulam was left with this phenomenal piece of kit. And he said to me, how can we use this in surgery? I said, well, if we could use it to control the laparoscope, that would mean we didn't need to find someone to hold the scope during an operation, and a machine could probably do a much better job than a human being. And that was the start of ESOP, the Automated Endoscopic System for Optimal Positioning. And then we collaborated on a whole range of other mythological Greek characters, and that company, Computer Motion, did quite well, eventually got incorporated into what is now Intuitive Surgical. And then Ulan went off to start In Touch Health, and I played a very small role in the early days of that. And I'm now supporting him with his World Telehealth Initiative, helping to bring telemedicine and robotics to parts of the world where they haven't got anything. So, yeah, it's been a marvellous journey.
It's absolutely fantastic. What an awesome story as well. You know, the kind of mention of the Star Wars acronym there, that kind of got me thinking, because I was reading actually, and I couldn't quite believe what I was reading. Really, man, just so mind blowing. But I've even seen actually that there is actually spin-offs for some of that work in NASA, for example, servicing of satellites using kind of, you know, the breakthroughs that are made in medical robotics might be used in the future to kind of service satellites and do things like that as well, which just blew my mind.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's not uncommon when you spin a technology from one application, it will eventually find its way back there.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, moving on to some of the kind of other things that you're kind of involved with, I was thinking one really nice thing to do might be, if it's okay with yourself, because some of our listeners might be, in that kind of area, involved with tech startups and, various medical writing firms and things like that. And I was thinking, it might be a bit of a daft question, really, but I was kind of thinking, you're clearly, had loads of experience, the kind of innovation and the kind of, getting into that entrepreneurial mindset. You've clearly got that. And I was wondering if you could kind of come up with, and it might be difficult on the spot, but a New Year's resolution for some people might be to try and get more into that mindset. You kind of hear things about, the 5 a.m. club and things like that, don't you? And I was wondering if there's anything that actually does work for yourself, to kind of keep engaged and keep innovating and keeping in that mindset. I wonder if you have any kind of tips for doing that, or is that a daft question?
No, there are no daft questions. It's a very good question. I mean, I think if I had any New Year's resolution, it would be learn to say no, because I find it very hard to say no to new opportunities, new ideas that get me excited. And I guess I must have ADHD, and I like seeing the new and the shiny. I do have 5 rules of engagement, if you will, and I encourage people to have their own rules of engagement. There's my 5. I'm hesitating because I want to say politely on air. Rule number 1 is predicated on a book I read by I think he's at Berkeley in the United States. It's only working with people who you like and respect. Some people say you should never do business with friends. My belief is you should only do business with friends. I'm apparently going to spend a very long time dead. So the time that I'm alive, I'd like to spend with people who I enjoy spending time with and who make me laugh, which is the second rule, which is do something that makes you happy, because then it's not work. It's joy, right? And then the third rule would be to learn something new every single day, because if you're learning, you're stimulated, and if you're stimulated, you're likely to be active. The fourth rule would be to do things that leave the world in a better place. And one of my mentors in medical business was the late Bill Cook. who started a massive medical device company, and he was what a fabulous human being he was to hang out with. Great man who I had the privilege to know. And then the final rule would be succeed. Failure is not an option. There will be plenty of people who will tell you why you can't do what you want to do, why it's not going to work. And, what's the old story about Edison that his assistant said, I don't know whether it was 100 or 1,000. We've tried 100 or 1,000 things, Mr. Edison. None of them work. This is a disaster. And he said, no, actually, this is wonderful because we now know the 100 or 1,000 things that don't work, so we're closer to the one that will work.
Yes.
It's just having that, I guess, degree of curmudgeonly belligerence that you're not going to say no. You're just going to keep going and you're going to refuse to lose.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much for that. And those are definitely 5 rules that, listeners should definitely take note of. Thank you for that. I might have to take note of them myself as well, actually, Jonathan. So thank you, much appreciated.
You're welcome.
I was thinking as well about perhaps, and this is another thing kind of on your kind of long list of things you've been involved with, which I just think it's fantastic how you managed to do this as well as all these other things. But you're a keen pilot as well, and you've actually been a medical consultant for OUP, I think how you pronounce it, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. But I thought that'd be really cool just to mention that work. I was trying to imagine if there's any kind of crossover at all. I can imagine there might be a slight amount of crossover in the, obviously, the kind of robotic surgery side of things and the kind of piloting aircraft side of things. Obviously, both involve, quite fabulous technology. I don't know if that's trying to think of a crossover there.
For me, aviation is so many things. There's the intellectual challenge of all the things that you have to know. There's the physical challenge of doing a good job and never being satisfied with the work you do and constantly revising, reviewing, considering. Someone once said to me, how do you know if you've made a great landing? And, in aviation terms, we say a good landing is one that you walk away from. A great landing is one where you get to use the aeroplane again. I always said, a great landing? Well, I'll tell you when I've made a great landing, because every time I've flown, I always think I could have done better. There's all the technical and intellectual elements of flying, but then frankly, there's something about taking off on a misty morning and climbing above valleys that are sheathed in fog. There's something about flying at night with just the firmament above you, just yourself in a metal tube, tens of thousands of feet above the earth. And from a business perspective, whilst I was living in the United States, I would fly myself all around the continent and beyond. And boy, it was so convenient, so efficient. And yes, I've tried to develop a few innovations in flying and in flying technique, and I'm also very interested in human performance, and aviation demands human performance, and I love writing, so I've been writing for my organisation, AOPA. When I say mine, I belong to it. I'm not, I don't lead it or anything, but it's a way of giving back and communicating to my fellow pilots. Many of whom, of course, are also doctors. So, it's been a joy, and I encourage anyone out there listening. Look, if I can get a pilot's license, you can get a pilot's license. It is hard work. It's not inexpensive, but it's not as expensive as people think it is.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think it comes back to one of your 5 rules, isn't it? About doing something that you love to do. Make sure you fill your life with things like that, and you're bound to kind of succeed in those things, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lovely song by Pink Floyd. I think it was written by Roger Waters, called astonishingly Learning to Fly, and it was about his experiences learning to fly. My son tells me it's an allegory for life, but there's a line in it, as you taxi onto the runway, something I've done thousands of times. And I always feel this sense of awe because there's a line into the distance, a ribbon of black, stretched to the point of no turning back. And I just always think of that sensation and think how privileged I was to be able to fly aeroplanes. And it's like, again, everything else in life. We spend a long time dead. Suck as much juice as you can out of every single day.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, what a philosophy to live by. And I think you've actually just answered because one of my last questions is always, would you like a song request? But I think you might have actually already answered that. Maybe it is some Pink Floyd, or is it going to be something different?
There's a phrase that we use in flying about, making radio requests and turning what's called the OBS prior to a turn. And it's triple T's. And there's a line in the song, Tongue-Tied and Twisted, which I believe is a nod to that. I love that song. I mean, I love Pink Floyd, but yeah, that would be my song.
Nice. Well, thanks, Jonathan. It's been absolutely fantastic chatting to you. I was wondering, actually, I don't know if you've ever collaborated with a chap called Professor Guangzong Yang. He used to direct Imperial's Hamlin Centre for Robotic Surgery. It just occurred to me that you might have brushed shoulders with him because he was a former guest on the show. Don't know if he rings any bells.
His name, we've never crossed paths. I'm currently working on a new project with some wonderful people in the United States, and it's an MRI compatible robot that's going to allow us to literally conduct surgical procedures whilst imaging lesions, for instance, in the brain.
Wow, yeah.
Using non-ferrous metals and 3D printed components, and the genius of a guy named Greg Fisher at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute in the northeast US of A, who came out of Russ Taylor's lab. There's a small cadre of people around the world who are utterly brilliant in this fold, and I just consider myself such a lucky boy to be able to sort of play in the sandbox with them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You've got a very long list of absolutely incredible breakthroughs that you've been involved with. So I think you more than deserve to be among them. You're definitely one of them. So yeah, I mean, thanks for chatting to us.
I carry their backs. They're the real brains. I just carry them.
Oh no, far too modest. But yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan. Really enjoyed chatting to you. Well, Dr. Sackier, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Monster Frequency. We'll have to grab you again very soon. So if you're listening in and you have any questions for Dr. Sackier, pop them my way, because I'll probably just force him to answer them. I'll just bombard his inbox. That's fine, I'm sure he won't mind. Maybe a bit, but Dr. Sackier, thank you very much. Now do join us again for our next episode of Monster Frequency. We'll be dropping very soon here on our channel, so stay tuned.